This is episode number 79, featuring artist Lori McNee. Welcome to the PleinAir podcast from PleinAir Magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir podcast, we dive into the world of outdoor painting called PleinAir painting. For those who don't know, plein is a French term, essentially meaning the open air or outdoors. The French say en plein air. Others pronounce it PleinAir. But no matter how you say it, there's a huge movement of artists around the country, actually around the world, going outdoors to paint. This show is about that movement. And this podcast is sponsored by the African Painting Safari. Yep, we're going to go paint animals and the beautiful scenery, really more of the beautiful scenery of Victoria Falls and so on, of Africa in the bush. And you can learn more about that at AfricanPaintingSafari.com. It is my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your friends. We're up to 240,000 people. A year ago, we were at 40,000 people. Pretty incredible. Anyway, and if you haven't got our new ebook, 240 Tips on Plein Air Painting by some of the top painters, you can pick it up at PleinAirTips.com. Also, if you have feedback or interview requests, email me, eric@PleinAirMagazine.com. Also, the interview is brought to you by the PleinAir Salon bi-monthly art competition, which offers $27,000 in annual prizes, including $15,000 for the grand prize winner and feature in the Plein Air Today newsletter if you're a bi-monthly winner, and you get the cover of Plein Air Magazine if you win the big prize. So that's PleinAirSalon.com. So we have artist Lori McNee. Lori, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here.
I am too.
Okay, so we're live at the Plein Air Convention in Santa Fe, and all the noise around us is the exhibit hall and the hallways. We've got an art gallery. There's a lot going on. So what's your experience been like here this week?
Fabulous. Having such a great time networking and painting, demoing, and just reconnecting with old friends and making new friends.
I saw you out there yesterday giving people tips and ideas. You were running around with your blue hat on and helping people. What's that experience like as an instructor to walk around and see a field of like 1,000 painters and just walking around? What do you learn about yourself or learn about painting? You see common mistakes?
Yes, I do see common mistakes, but at first I got there and everybody had set up before I did. I didn't even paint because I had been demoing and I was kind of tired of painting. So I wanted to walk around and just help others. In fact, I got a lot of good feedback about that. They really were glad that I was there sharing my tips.
Yeah. Well, you have a book, don't you? You have a book, something about tips?
I do.
Oh,
It's named after my blog, which is finearttips.com, and it's a Northlight book that was published a couple years ago, and it's completely relevant, timeless, and it is called Fine Art Tips with Lori McNee, and I share my own tips as well as about 25 other world-class artists share their tips.
And you have a brand new DVD out, too.
I do, yes.
Tell me about that.
That's a fabulous new DVD called Luminous Landscape Painting with Water Mixable Oils, and it's for oil painting, obviously, but I am working with water mixable oils and show my inside secrets to painting with them because they seem to be kind of a mystery to people still. So.
Yeah, I think so, too, and I don't want to talk about that, but I think that... So the DVD applies to anybody who paints in
Absolutely.
Oil painting or pastel or anything else. It's basically how you do landscapes and how you get that luminous feel.
Right.
It's just that you happen to be using a particular type of medium, which is waterless oil paint.
Correct. Well, not waterless.
I mean water.
Well, that's true,
water
though.
mixable.
They're water mixable, and they are. There's misnomer that they are water-based. They're not water-based. They're still linseed oil paints.
Yeah.
But an emulsifier is added to allow water and oil to mix for a very short period of time, and we could talk about that.
Well,
when you're ready.
let's talk about it now because
Okay.
I think it's a really interesting concept, and then we don't have to deal with it later.
Okay.
This is relatively new. I mean, probably 10 years or so.
Well, they've been on the market for longer than that. In fact, I've been painting with water mixable oils for probably 20 years.
Really? I didn't know that.
I have, yeah. And I used to use Grumbacher and Artisan, and it's all personal choice. But when I met Kyle, the
product manager or CEO or whatever of
Royal Talons, and they make Rembrandt paints and Cobra. And I actually met him in Vegas at the first PleinAir convention, and we started a really great partnership. And I'm an ambassador now for their company for Cobra oils, and it's been just a fabulous experience for me. And I've really helped bring a lot of attention to the water mixable oil movement. But anyway, so I switched because I mentioned the word emulsifier, and it's again, it's chemistry, which I know just enough to be dangerous. Yeah. But the water and oil mix because of a vegetable emulsifier, where the other guys, some of the other brands use a detergent, and so one of the complaints is people say, oh, they can be sticky or they can drag or whatever. But with this vegetable modifier emulsifier, it allows the creaminess that we are used to with traditional oils.
Yeah, well, when you look at your oil paintings, you can't tell they're any different. I mean, they look great. I think one of the things that I love is the idea of not having to use solvents.
Absolutely. It is solvent-free.
Right. So there are a lot of people who are concerned that some solvents are perfectly fine, but some solvents probably are not.
No.
And there are people who are concerned about health issues, and some people just don't like the smell.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I love is I went to Russia one time and I wanted to paint, but I couldn't. I got into a cab. I didn't have a translator. I finally figured out how to tell him art store, and we went to this art store, and I didn't know how to say turpentine or solvent, and I ended up, I spent $200 on a cab driving all around St. Petersburg looking for
paint thinner,
and it was very frustrating, and so I ended up not painting not painting well because I didn't have any way to clean my brushes. So I like the idea of not having to do that, because when I travel to foreign countries, the first thing I do is I go buy some kind of paint thinner or solvent, and it's a big, giant hassle.
Right. And I think you'll enjoy this. I know you haven't had time because we just finished producing it and editing it. It's only, just 2 weeks totally packaged and ready to go. But anyway, because I know in the past you said you have struggled with them a little bit. And so I really help demystify it for people out there.
Well, I found out I was doing something dramatically wrong.
Oh.
I found out that, so I was painting on a oil primed surface.
There you go. Yes.
And I couldn't, and I was having, a kind of a sticky feeling, and I couldn't get the paint to dry.
Yes.
And Kyle said to me, well, duh, you're supposed to put it on an acrylic surface.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, acrylic gesso. And you can paint with an oil primed surface, but you cannot use water. And
okay. So you can use it.
You still can.
They have a medium that you can use.
Yes, we have mediums, different mediums, glazing, painting medium, and quick dry, which is my favorite right now, because you take it in the field and you can just use the quick dry medium, and especially if it's snowing, because the water will freeze up. So use the medium, and then they're dry to the touch in a few days. So it's great for travel.
So do you paint in the snow?
I do.
I was outside yesterday in Santa Fe. We were all, the scene was amazing. We were in the square in downtown Santa Fe. And, of course, painters were all over Santa Fe. But there had to be a few hundred downtown yesterday.
Yeah.
And when the sun went down, it got so cold. It was warm. It was nice. But it got so cold, and I thought, I could never paint in the snow. How do you do it?
Well, I just have gotten used to that. I live in Sun Valley, Idaho, which is a ski resort, and I love being out in I'm a Southern California girl originally, so I do get cold. But I have all the gear, and I just go out in the warm part of the day in the winter. But I still get out there when it's below freezing, and I just dress really warmly and take my dogs and have a good time, and take little breaks and go sit in my car and heat up. And I don't go too far out there in the winter.
So you stay next to you. Yeah. So you're not sitting in your car with the heater on.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I have before.
Yeah. I don't remember the name of the artist, but I encountered one time an artist in Vermont. He's dead. But he had this art gallery. He had a wagon on sleigh. So what do they call them? Skids or something. And it was an enclosed space. It was like a small room, and it had a potbelly stove in it,
wow.
and all windows.
Yeah.
And then it had a horse hookup. So this guy, I don't think it was Redfield because he was in a different part of the country, but this guy hooked it up to his horses and went out and then painted from inside.
I need one of those.
Yeah, it's pretty cushy.
Yeah.
A good idea. So let's go back. I'm kind of curious about how this journey began for you. You're now very well known. You have hundreds of thousands of followers on your blogs and your social media, and in the artist community, I mean, you're considered one of the top artists around here. You've got, everybody's, I've been watching, people are asking you for your time, and it's, you probably feel like an art star. And
it's fun.
So I'm curious how this all began for you.
Well, I've been painting for, as long as I can remember, I've been drawing and then painting. And I took art in college. I didn't major in art. I got frustrated with the art program, but I did learn how to render and draw in college. And then when my kids were little, I started painting more professionally. I was a wildlife artist, and I studied with some of the top wildlife artists, Robert Bateman, Carl Brinders, John Siri Lester. And I ended up illustrating and doing things like duck stamps and that sort of thing. I never won a duck stamp, but I would come in honorable mention, just enough to keep me going and to motivate me while my kids were young. And I was in a gallery for a short period of time, but I wasn't prolific enough back then because I only could paint in between loads of laundry or when my kids were taking naps, or until 3 a.m. I would paint. But then in the year 2000, one thing about being a wildlife artist is we need to know how to paint landscapes. And so I wanted to understand how to paint the landscape better. So I signed up for a PleinAir workshop with Robert Moore. And he's a really fabulous landscape painter. And so we painted during the day, we painted landscapes, and then at night we did still life. And it was the first time I'd ever painted a still life or even saw how to set one up. I always thought that was kind of a strange thing. How do you set up a still life? So anyway, that totally changed the way I paint, and I started wanting to paint from life rather than just from photographs.
Right.
But being a wildlife artist, I still add birds to my still life. I love birds a lot.
So how do these wildlife artists get their subject matter? I mean, you can't. It's hard to find animals.
It is. Well, you go to the zoo and you sketch and that sort of thing, but being in Idaho, that I didn't have a zoo handy. I live close to nature and I take a lot of photographs, but there's reference photos, and you have to be really mindful when you use reference photos that you change them enough because of copyright law.
Right. You can't just copy somebody's photo and make a painting.
Right. So, they do have these special preserves or places where photographers can go and photograph animals. And I used to do a lot of that, too. And then I started feeling sorry for those animals. And so I've decided I don't really like that.
Okay.
So, but anyway.
So how did...
I wanted to set them all free.
When you started going outdoors and painting from life, how did that change your painting?
Oh, gosh, it just brought so much more life, literally, to my paintings. And even just working with still life in my studio does, because you really see, as you know, photographs, reference photos are flat, and you lose a lot of the depth and the color and the shadows. The shadows are dark, and so when you're outside, shadows aren't ever just gray. There's so much color and reflected light, and you start seeing that color and training your eye, and it just brings so much more depth to your work.
I've heard that so many times now from people who have spent their lives studio painting, and and some of them were remarkable painters, but when they went outdoors, everything changed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm so addicted now that I can't paint from a photograph. I have to paint from a study that I've done outdoors. If I'm doing a studio painting, is that what you do, or do you?
I do. I go out and do my little studies, and then I take a lot of reference photos, and then I go back and I'll enlarge from the study. and work with the reference photos. I have a computer monitor next to my easel, and that's the way a lot of artists are working nowadays. And so I can blow up my reference photo. And I don't know, did you ever take typing in school as a kid?
I did.
Yeah, I remember we'd have the copy to our left.
Yeah.
And do you remember they told us that it's healthier for you to look to the left and work to the right. And so there was something about the brain. And so I've kind of set my computer and the monitor off to my left for that very reason, just because they taught me that back in college.
Are you right-handed?
I'm right-handed. And yes, so being a lefty, maybe that wouldn't be as convenient. But anyway, that's how I set it up. And then I have my reference to my left, and it does help to have it blown up on a computer rather than just printed on copy paper, because you still can see more of the colors on a monitor.
So are you going out and participating in plein air shows? You see, obviously now there's probably 300-400 shows around the country where there's 10, 20, 30, 40 artists, plein air Easton, plein air Maui. I'm sure somebody's going to say, why didn't you mention mine? Are you doing any of that? Because I know you were, and I wondered.
Well, I like you, I wear many hats, and my favorite one is being an artist. Well, other than being a mom, my kids are all grown, but family first, and then being an artist. But I've spread myself a bit thin, and so I am in galleries, and all my galleries have paint outs that are associated with the gallery. So I put those as a priority. And then if I have time, I will enter some of those other competitions, but I haven't, or not competitions, but plein air events or competitions sometimes. But I'm also doing workshops around the country and around the world.
How many are you doing a year?
Right now I'm doing 1, 2, 3. I'm doing 2 in Italy and going back to Monet's Gardens coming up in September and October. And so 4, I think, right now, international, and then a couple regional. And
so I'm curious about something. I've had some dialogue with some artists, and maybe even you, about this, is that one of the things that just amazes me is a lot of people come to a workshop and then they don't do anything that they're taught. Do you see that?
Yes, I do. And I say, I'm not trying to change somebody into painting like me, but I kind of say at the beginning of the workshop, kind of like a win in Rome, just try and be here, do your best to learn something from me. And I don't want you to paint exactly like me, but if you could just leave with 1 or 2 new tools to add to your bag of tricks, then it's a worthwhile workshop. And so that's what I'm always striving to instill in my students.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from workshop instructors who say that, there's always a couple people who they don't even pay attention. They're just painting what they want, and they're not taking anything out of it. I think they're just there to paint, but I'm just curious.
Right. I had a couple of those in Italy in October, and I'm going back again this coming October. I took, it was 12 students, and then they had their spouses and friends, and it was a huge group. It was, but I had probably 3 of them that were doing just that, and they just had a mind of their own, and then they were frustrated, but they still, I get calls and they're like, okay, I know why you were telling me that now,
Yeah.
So, you do get a few of those.
Yeah. Well, what's nice now is there are also places you can go and just paint. There's artist retreats and things now, which is different than workshops for those kind of folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So have you ever done the plein air circuit where you've done a lot of shows, or have you tried to avoid that in your career?
I've done a few, and I kind of have avoided it a little bit. I don't know. I enjoy it to a certain extent. And again, because my galleries that I'm in have those events, and then I'm doing my own travels, my own events, and then I'm painting for shows, I don't have much more time.
Yeah, you'd be gone all the time.
Yeah, I'd be gone all the time.
Well, I think also it's interesting because, it can become addictive. But I've talked to some of these artists who are just on the road all the time, and sometimes they'll do one of these shows and then nothing sells, and that's frustrating because they're spending their own money to go there.
Right. It can be frustrating. I also, besides painting, I have started to add to my schedule 1 trek a year. And so, like this last summer, I went to Switzerland and Italy, and I circumvented the Monte Rosa Glacier, and we ended up at the Matterhorn. And we were hiking and trekking in the Alps 16 miles a day. And I brought my paints, and it was a goal to paint one painting a day. And I'm going in June, I'm going to Norway, and I'm going to be up in the Arctic Circle.
Oh.
So these are, besides painting, I feel like that enriches my life. Is that the word? Enriches?
Yeah, but it also gives you a great story. I mean, you
Right.
look back over the history books of, you see pictures of these artists out in these remote locations, and it's a great story, and you can build a show around it, and I think it kind of enhances your legend, so
Yes.
to speak, because not everybody will do that. I can't imagine myself doing that. And I have friends that climb mountains and do things like that, and it's just not something that's in my DNA.
I love it. At home, I'm in training all the time. Because being an artist is pretty solitary and also sedentary. Also, in fact, on my blog, I wrote an article about the healthy artist, how to stay that way, and gave all kinds of exercising tips for artists that stand at their easel or sit at their easel, especially the sitters, because we need to get up every 20 minutes to move, or it's really unhealthy for us. Because sitting is dangerous, actually.
So and by the way, for artists, they need to get up and get perspective on their painting and get away from
totally.
it, get a break.
Yep.
So what I started doing is I put my paper towel across the room.
Hey, that's smart.
And because, it forces, because I always forget to look. And so when a paper towel's across the room, I have to take a break.
That's good.
And it forces me at least to get perspective. And you paint till you're tired, and then you start making stupid mistakes. And
That's funny, because when I was filming and staying on your property, and I needed some paper towels, I snuck in your studio looking for paper towels. I'm like, where does he keep his paper towels? So I had to walk around looking for them.
well, if you would have looked under the cabinet, there were about 300
That's
rolls.
where I found them. I did.
So you do a lot of teaching, and we have, of course, a lot of people who are discovering painting because they accidentally stumbled into the PleinAir podcast.
Right.
We have 500 new people here at the convention. We had, this morning I asked how many new painters there were that were just brand new PleinAir painters, and there were probably 25 or 30 people who did their first PleinAir painting here at the convention. And most of those are coming through the podcast. And so there are people who are saying, hey, I want to do this, I want to learn this. So what's your best advice to somebody who's listening right now who says, I'd like to explore this PleinAir painting thing. In some cases, they're not even painters.
Right.
Where do I begin?
What really helped me when I first started painting outdoors is I grabbed Kevin McPherson's new book. And that just had come out, which is now an old book, but
it's a great book.
It's what's it called? Painting Light or something like.
Light and Color.
Light and Color. Thank you. We have a little audience here today.
Yeah. Hi, guys.
Watching a podcast, kind of an interesting notion.
It's like watching paint dry. Of course, they're painters, so they're used to that.
I know. But anyway, and he challenged the reader to paint 100 paintings, little 6x8s, and so this was during the summer, and I was still, soccer mom mode. And so I had a little pochade box that I made. They weren't even making them much.
What's a
back
pochade
then.
box?
Pochade box is a French term. It's a little painting box.
Kind of like a cigar box.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I made mine out of a cigar box, like the old master impressionists did that would go out into the field. They had their large French easels, but they would also make compact little painting kits out of cigar boxes. And so that's what I did, made my own little cigar box, and I was able to paint 6x8s. And I challenged myself, and while I was watching my daughter ice skate, I'd be doing little sketches, or my kids playing soccer or hockey or whatever. And for that summer, I painted a painting a day. And you like my shoes? And he glanced down at my sparkly dancing boots for tonight. But anyway, and at the end of it all, I had them in my studio, and a girlfriend had come over to my house and was looking at all these little 100 paintings. And at the time, I also did a couple little still life paintings, and one had a bird on it. But anyway, she said, I would love to show these in my store. And I said, oh, wow, that's really nice. She goes, frame them up and let's have a big show for you. So that's what I did. And during Gallery Walk, the store happened to be right near the galleries in Sun Valley, Idaho. We have actually a very strong gallery association. Some really top national galleries are there. And so the people would come by, and I had a sellout show. And wow. Yeah, while it was still up hanging, I a couple days later walked down to Nealon Gallery, and I grabbed the director and said, hey, Carrie, would you mind just coming next door and looking at my work that, everything's sold, a lot of red dots. I'd love you to come look at it. She came in, and she's like, wow, these are great. And she said, I really like these, And she goes, hey, and I like that still life with the little bird. I want more of those, and I'd love to represent you. And so that kind of was the beginning of my professional gallery career.
Well, so, it's not just luck, though. You made your own luck. I mean,
absolutely.
You went out of your way to contact somebody. You went out of your way and did all this. I think it's great. And that's one of the problems, that so many artists are introverts and they just don't want to go out there, put themselves out there. They're insecure because they don't know if anybody's going to like it, but you've got to put yourself out there. Right.
And, I've learned about that because I've been in many very good galleries over the years, and I have learned a lesson. There is a balancing act about that. And may I share a little story about that?
Yes, please.
So I had been in Nealon for quite a few years, and some other galleries picked me up from seeing me advertise in your magazines or some of the other magazines.
There are no other magazines.
Some of the other guys out there. But anyway, and so I knew that I wanted to be in a certain demographic, so I went gallery shopping. And I talk about how to shop for galleries on my blog, finearttips.com, and have some really great tips. Well, I kind of pushed myself on a gallery this one time, though, and I went in and I brought my work in, and it was a husband and wife team, and the wife really loved it, or excuse me, I'm sorry, the husband really liked it and took me on. The wife came around the corner and said, oh, who's this? And, he said, this is Lori McNee, we're going to start representing her, and she wasn't happy she didn't have a say in it. So right away, there was already kind of this contention between them that they weren't on the same page about taking on a new artist, but they took me on. But the wife was never happy that I was in there. The husband was, and she wasn't. And they ended up divorced later, not over this, I hope. But I guess the moral of that story is, unless people are really excited about you, it's not a good fit. You want the gallery to be as excited about you as you are with them. So that's an important lesson that I learned years ago.
We talked about that a little bit in Art Marketing Boot Camp this morning, and the idea is that whoever is representing you, selling your paintings, has got to be enthusiastic about you, because otherwise they're just going to sit there.
Right.
Because a salesperson is representing all the artists in the gallery, and they're going to go to the one that's the easiest to sell.
Right.
Of course, people are going to find what they love, but sometimes it's a choice of two or three, and they're going to have to pick one.
That's right.
And you want them picking you. So a friend of mine, Charles White, actually, every time somebody sells something, he sends them a box of chocolates, good chocolates. And so what happens is, over time, now they'll push his work just because he's nice enough to think about them and send them a box of chocolates.
Well, that's really a nice story, and it is a relationship and a partnership, and it works both ways. And I want to just say that a new gallery during this event, the PleinAir convention, big deals go down here, you guys. It's been very career changing for me to be involved with the PleinAir convention. Thank you so much, Eric. I'm very, very grateful to you and your staff, by the way. You're so fabulous, top-notch people. But anyway, a new gallery has taken me on, and I was ready to expand a little bit, and so I'm really excited about that.
And that happened here?
Yes, that happened here
wow,
just
how
the other
exciting.
day.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Yes, she's been watching me for a long time, and is Jane Bellmeyer. She's she has a loom, and she's going to put me in Authentique, which is a sister gallery, and because I besides PleinAir, I paint still life and also encaustic. I kind of have a wide range of what I do, and she's excited about that.
You're using a term that a lot of these people don't know. What the heck is encaustic?
Yes, so encaustic is wax painting, and it means to burn in. It's
so do you use candles?
Well, do you remember playing with candles as a kid ever and dripping it all? I love that feeling, and so we use candle wax almost. It is wax, pigmented wax, and I have to use fire and melt it, and it's very dangerous, and it's also labor intensive, and it's very toxic. So I have a huge ventilation system. Here I am solvent-free and trying to go non-toxic with my water mixable solvent-free oils by Cobra, but now I love encaustic paintings.
Well, the good news is if we buy your paintings, you'll be dead early.
There you go. That's right. They'll be worth more. So, oh my gosh.
No.
Yeah, so I'm really enjoying that. And but it's kind of neat because I'm in the Encaustic Museum of Art in New Mexico. I wish I had time to visit it. I came on that scene very quickly, and I'm already at the top of that world.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Cool. Well, hopefully we'll get some pictures of that and post it on the hosting page for the podcast.
Oh, okay,
and that'd be cool so people can see what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd like that.
All right.
Thank you.
So what are the common things that people continually run into that you're finding that, when you do the workshops, when you're trying to help people learn, what are the mistakes that people need to overcome? Do you see patterns that people always tend to have problems with?
Yeah, I do. Sometimes there's a few common things that I see, and I was seeing it yesterday when I was out walking around in the plaza helping people. They forget the fundamentals, the very basic fundamentals, which I talk about in my new DVD video, which you could download the link, or you can buy the actual DVD Luminous Landscape Painting.
Where do they get that?
That is through you. Where do we get that? Actually, will you let us know through Streamline? But he has to look.
Well, this is with Lilidol.
Lilidol.
And
okay.
so you would get it at Lili Lili.
Okay, thank you.
Artvideo.com.
Thank you for that. But anyway, oil painters. I'm speaking. I teach. I used to be an acrylic painter, and that is different. A little bit to me more forgiving than oil paint. Because oil painting, I like to think there are no rules in art, but there are just a few fundamentals we have to follow because it's chemistry. And one of the things is I saw even out in the field, like I said yesterday, is people are starting to paint with white right away. And that's going to muddy up their colors and chalk it up, and white dries slower. You want to start with a transparent underpainting and start building up from lean to fat, thin to thick. Because one of the mistakes, and you even see it in museums, you'll notice cracks in paintings, and that's because the oil paint underneath was thicker than the layers on top. And oil paint is always curing. It's organic. It's always moving. And even 100 years later, it's still curing and shrinking and cracking if it's not applied correctly. That's one of the big mistakes I see.
Yeah, so one of the great tricks is just to leave white off of your palette until you get to the point where you have that underpainting done, because you start putting it in, it's going to chalk it up right away.
So you agree with that?
Oh,
then,
I do
of
agree
course.
with that.
Yeah.
And,
so I saw that.
I actually learned that from Eric Coppell, and something he does is he paints a thin brown underpainting layer,
right?
And he won't break out the white until as he delays it as long as he possibly can, because it changes everything.
Yeah, and I do my best to do that too. And the other thing, being a still life painter, and my heroes have been the Rembrandt-esque or the David Lafelle, and I missed him because I was painting opposite him the other day.
Oh no!
I know, but I still had a good crowd. Thank you.
Boy, that's tough being up
that was
against
so
David
tough.
Lafelle.
I'm like, oh please, why? Because he's one of my heroes, and I didn't even get to see him.
Oh, no.
And so I was very grateful for any of you out there that came to watch me. I was very honored to have you there. But anyway, I love the transparency. that oil paint has. It's something that oftentimes is overlooked, and with the glazing process and the transparent layers, we can create a sense of almost like stained glass, where the light is coming through and the beautiful colors are refracting and coming through the different layers of paint. So that's another thing that I see that the painters, the newer painters, get very excited and they want to just get thick and fatty right away, and they forget about the transparent glazes. So
values, you run into
values,
that
of course, yes. So a strong painting, any kind of painting, the fewer values, the stronger the painting. So try and keep it to 4 values is kind of a good rule of thumb. And design too. Design, not having tangents, and there's all kinds of stuff.
So explain what a tangent is.
Well, that's what I was trying to do, and I can't because I'm talking
So
with
a tangent.
my hands.
So let's see if we can figure this out.
You can't see me.
Let's
so
say.
what is a tangent? It's where maybe you're creating an angle touching something else, not overlapping. I don't know. Am I explaining it okay?
Yeah. Well, yesterday I was painting. Yesterday I was painting in Santa Fe, and I was painting.
Help me out there, guys.
I was painting a.
What? Yeah, bump up. Okay.
Things bump up together.
Yes.
So what I was yesterday.
See,
I
we're
was
visual.
painting,
I need to be like. Yeah, here we go. The audience is all helping.
they'll
We're all using our hands right now.
They'll find it in the video. So,
Okay, that's it.
But for
My
instance,
new
yesterday
DVD.
I had painted this door, and then I realized it was kind of a door or a window at the top of my building, and then I had the tree going right up and meeting the door, and I thought, well, that to me was a tangent.
Yeah,
you know?
there you go, exactly.
What I had to do is I had to move the window because I already put the tree in,
Right.
So they wouldn't they wouldn't run into each other.
Right. Well, a lady yesterday, she had the edge of an umbrella kind of coming toward the edge of the painting as well. And so this arrow of the shape of the umbrella just was taking the eye right off the page, right off the canvas. So things like that, design. And a good rule of thumb, which is used by photographers and also with those of us out there in the field painting, is the rule of thirds, like a tic-tac-toe board. If you kind of put a tic-tac-toe board across your canvas in your mind's eye, that kind of helps you design.
Yeah, so back in elementary school, they taught us to put everything in the dead center, which
Right.
is just is really boring. So what you would do is you'd pick one of the corners of the tic-tac-toe board where the lines meet,
Yes.
and say, okay, that would be a good place for a
Yes.
focal point. One of those
That's
four
right. Very good.
things.
Very
And
good.
what
Eric.
do you do with your focal points? Because some people have differing philosophies. So I can tell you 2 different people with 2 different philosophies. Joe McGurl makes everything in perfect focus everywhere, unless he's pushing distance out, of course. And C.W. Mundy, on the other hand, will say, I want my focal point in focus and then everything else to be, fuzzy and fuzzier as you get further out, or more, less sharp edges, et cetera.
Right. Well, there's quite a few ways of developing a focal point or the center of interest in a painting. And one way is what you're saying is to have more focus on a certain area, and the rest is fuzzier, so to speak. Another way is, like you mentioned, edges. The harder the edge, so sharper edges create your eye will go to that area. That's a way of creating a focal point as center of interest.
Yeah.
And color, more chroma, more color is another way. Creating more color in a certain section and mute the color. And I know there's another way. Am I
Right.
forgetting something? But
Right.
those are some ways of creating a focal point. And so, in mine, I don't really have a system. Every painting to me has its own personality. I start, and even with still life, I have a concept in mind.
Right.
And each painting has its own personality.
Right.
And even, one of the most common questions I get asked is, how long did it take to paint that? Do you get asked that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your answer is 2 hours and 20 years?
Right, exactly. That's a good one. I say a lifetime because it takes a lifetime of knowledge that goes into your painting to create it, you know, and they're like, no, come on, really, how long?
Well, there's this sense from people who don't understand what painting's all about, that it can't be good if it was done fast or if it was done in plein air in a couple of hours, which is absolutely crazy.
And that's why I say, look, this may have taken an hour to paint, but it took a lifetime of knowledge to go into that hour. You know, we don't say that to a doctor that charges $15,000 for an hour operation, right?
Yeah.
You know, all his education or her education went into that operation.
And decades of practice.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But I was gonna expand on that, and I'm blanking out right now.
Well, one of the things I was curious: does anybody in the audience have any questions? Because if you do, you can step up here to the mic at any point, and we'll bring the questions up. Is that you, sir? You have a question? Come right up here, and you've got to get pretty close to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Craig Howdeshell.
Hi.
I'm actually a professional photographer, not a painter, but I'm a strong believer. I'm a strong believer in studying art, not studying photography. So I appreciate Eric, and I appreciate having been here at the show for a period of time. Here's my question. Just a moment ago, you were talking about different techniques to create a focal point. One technique that photographers use a lot is a vignette type situation. As a painter, have you ever tried a similar type of thing where towards the edges of a painting you would get darker?
Oh, yeah. So that's actually, I have done that for years, especially with my still life. I do that, and it's kind of almost like a deconstruction in a way, you know, kind of scraping off. A lot of painters are doing that, and it's become even more popular with painters because of photography, because of apps like Instagram and the filters, and they, you know, fuzz out the edges. So that's definitely interesting. So art and photography are closely related, and they do influence each other.
Also, skies. Oftentimes, you know, the reality is that, you know, the sky is not a flat surface. It's a kind of a circle going over you. So a lot of painters will darken the edges of the skies. Right. And, you know, gradually a little darker as it goes out, so it gives the sense of reality, so that it feels like it's kind of coming over your head.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That was a good question.
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well.
I know what I was going to add.
Oh, good.
I know. I'm sorry, because I went blank for a minute. So
that happens.
How long? It does. I'm blonde. You can't see me, but I'm blonde. Anyway.
Oh, you're going to get in a lot of trouble.
No, don't do that. You did that to me a couple years ago on stage. The blonde jokes came out. But anyway. I
learned my lesson. I'll never do it again.
So here's a little bit more I wanted to add about how long did it take to paint that thing. So each painting, for me, is almost like childbirth. And it has its own personality, like I said. And some paintings go more quickly than others. And some paintings, and you struggle and you struggle and struggle, and it takes a long time to finish them and to birth this painting. And but you've learned so much from that experience. And so each painting, I always do say, kind of, you just never know.
Yeah. So does it ever get easy?
Quickly.
You know, I know in business, I have a mentor, and I said to him, you know, you've been in business for, 60 years. Does it ever get easy? And he said, no, it never gets easy. You know, you're used to dealing with certain things, but it's never easy. What about in painting?
Sometimes you do have days where kind of everything, the stars align and it goes really smoothly. And then it's funny, I was just having this conversation the other day with some fellow artists that are, very well known, very esteemed painters. And a couple of them were saying, I haven't painted for I have forgotten how to paint. Oh my gosh, I haven't painted for a couple months. And the other day, I'm like, I need to watch my own DVD. Oh my gosh. Sometimes you feel like you blank out sometimes, or you've lost your muse or whatever.
Well, I think one of the things that impressed me about you is that you rehearsed. You said that you painted several days in a row before you were painting. And what happens to me when I do my event in the Adirondacks, I don't get to paint all day, every day, very often.
Right.
And most people don't if they have jobs and so on. So by the end of that week, I'm painting like a rock star because I'm doing 2 or 3
Exactly.
paintings a day. Yesterday I went out and I said, I'm painting like, badly. And because I haven't picked up a paintbrush in 2 or 3 weeks. And,
Right.
and so it was like, just didn't come naturally. Max Ginsburg, when he came in to do his video with us, he said he painted continuously for 2 solid weeks because he wanted to be tuned up. I said, Max, you've been painting for 60 years. He said, you lose it if
See?
you don't paint every
Exactly.
day.
It's like a muscle, You still have it, but it's weaker. And there is muscle memory, of course, involved, but it is like working out. And if you don't use it, you start to lose it. But it will come back.
And if you can't paint every day, you might find an opportunity to draw. Like I doodle during meetings. Sometimes I'll sketch the people I'm in meetings in, just because I have in my pocket right now. Oops. Fell on the ground, living proof. I have a sketchbook and a pencil that I
Oh,
always
good for
carry
you.
with me.
Yeah.
And the idea here is that I sketch anytime I get a chance, not when I'm driving, but the idea of just always keeping that hand-eye coordination tuned up, because if you don't, you lose it. Did
That's
me no
true.
good yesterday, however.
Oh, you were doing a good job out there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I totally agree with that. And as you said, I was prepared for creating my DVD, and I weeks ahead of time knew exactly what I was going to do, and I practiced my painting over twice before I actually came down to Texas to film. And I brought my little studies with me, which actually both of them sold here, which was really fun. They found happy homes. But I had them with me along with my iPad with the images, my reference material. And so I was well prepared, and it went well. Because it's kind of nerve-wracking being filmed and demonstrating or being on stage. And, I enjoy it. I love talking to you all and answering questions and all of that. But at the same time, I want what I'm doing to turn out. And so it's good to practice.
Yeah, it is kind of tough painting in front of a camera
It is.
and also having to talk the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
Not easy. So what have we not talked about yet that might be of interest to our listeners that you want to share? Is there anything in particular that we've missed?
So as I said, I wear many hats,
Yeah.
and I told you this, and I thought, well, maybe I wouldn't share it, but then I kind of think it's kind of fun. So I'm also a movie producer. It's a B movie that I've gotten into the B movie world. My youngest son, is an actor, and he came a year ago to me with this project that he was a co-star in this film that's being made in Thailand. I know it sounds really horrible, but Thailand is an action film industry, and it's kind of like a Jean-Claude Van Damme style movie. And so we filmed it, and I ended up, along with my dad, we're executive producers of this film. And it's actually pretty good.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. The name of it is Haphazard.
Well, we'll be able to say we knew you when.
And you'll be able to see it on Netflix pretty soon.
Oh, cool.
And it was supposed to make it to the Cannes Film Festival, but we're not quite ready. But it will go to the Toronto Film Festival.
Oh, outstanding.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So you and I did a DVD or a video together years ago on Facebook and other social media. I'm curious, a lot of things continually change. A lot of the data that's in there is now no longer valid, but a lot of it is still valid.
You always say a lot, but it is.
Well, it's not a lot. It's a little. That's
okay.
about 2%. 2% of it.
We just sold out of it out there. And
Oh, we did?
Yeah, we did. We had quite a few copies, and they're all gone. So it's still relevant. What I would say, 70% of it is still relevant.
Yeah.
I really would, Eric.
Yeah.
Because we covered blogging, which that hasn't changed a whole lot. We covered how to. We covered a lot of topics.
Well, the marketing habits that relate to that are all totally valid.
Yeah, exactly.
And the only thing is really there's a couple of little technology things that have been added since then.
That's the difference.
Like when we did it, they didn't have Facebook Live.
Yes, that's true.
I mean,
And
not much more than that. But
no, so I think we're kind of okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and you drop the price a little bit because of that reason. And so I think it's fair to everybody. You're still going to learn a lot about how to brand yourself. We talk about branding, which is I call it evergreen. Evergreen. It means it doesn't. Well, what does evergreen mean? What do I mean by evergreen? Evergreen content is not going to go outdated. It doesn't have a shelf life. The DVD does have a shelf life because of some of these things we're talking about.
Right.
But a big part of it is evergreen content inside.
yeah, absolutely.
Did I make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so as we wrap this up,
Yes.
first off, any more questions from the audience? Yes, we have one stepping up. Just step up
Come
to the
on
mic.
down.
Get real close to the mic here. All right, state your name.
Carl Cedergren.
Hi.
From Stillwater, Minnesota. And do you ever, Bill Davidson, I believe it was, he said his demo yesterday, he says he works from his lightest lights, like a sun, and works out from there. Do you ever work like that?
So once he's laid, you know what? I paint
With
with
the
Bill.
light
We went on a
source,
pack trip last summer together to Lake Adiza in the Sierra Nevadas. But I honestly, I would say he starts pretty much like everybody,
else.
and then that must be his focal point, right? Is the
focal
sky?
point, yes.
He's
And how it lit the clouds
right.
up.
He's doing his best to get those very bright, clear whites and lights and colors in, not to get them muddied by too many darks underneath, is what I'm assuming. I haven't watched him demo and explain it that way, but I would say that's most likely what his process in his mind is.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's just the way he was working
Yeah.
yesterday in the demo.
Yeah, well, everybody
It's
has.
interesting.
It is interesting, and you know he's has that nailed, and so good. I hope you learned a thing or
Thank you
two
very much.
from him. Thank you.
You know, that's one of the things that's fascinating is every time I turn around, I think I've seen everything, and then you see a painter who approaches things completely different.
Right.
That's why these videos are so wonderful, because you see, you know, they've learned this from somebody somewhere along the road, and it works for them, and there's still 1,000 different approaches to painting.
And it can be very confusing to people. I mean, how many artists are here? Like 1,000 almost or something. And then there's, how many instructors do we have?
Well, we have over 80. I was just thinking, you know, this is kind of amazing. I mean, while you were talking, Michael Harding walked by, and I thought, wow, that's cool. There's, you know, this
It's
a guy who
so
owns
cool.
a paint company walks by, and you know, I'm looking in the exhibit hall, and I can see some well-known artists. It's just
know.
like they're everywhere.
It's amazing.
Michael Orwick was in the audience a minute
Right.
ago, and there's some faculty members down there.
Yeah.
It's just really kind of fun. It's like being able to hang out with all the people that you read about.
Right, all the who's who, for sure.
Yeah.
But it can be overwhelming for the participants a little bit. You know, they are learning so much and so many different approaches. And so just like with a workshop, if you can just distill a few things out of it, just go home, relax, maybe don't paint for a couple days, and just it's like stirring a pot, and everything's kind of...
Let it sink in.
Yeah, let it sink in, and the little nuggets that are going to help your painting will come through.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're gonna love this experience, and it'll be a great memory for you.
Well, this has been fun having a chat with you.
Yes.
Tell us again the name of your book.
Oh, the name of my book is Fine Art Tips.
Fine Art Tips with Lori McNee.
Painting techniques and professional advice. And there's, again, I've featured 25 very famous artists in there: landscape, still life, portrait.
You
and
know
wildlife.
everybody, don't you?
I know I do.
Yeah.
Just like you.
You know more than I know.
I don't know.
And
about
then
that.
tell me about your new video again.
And I have it right here in front of me. Luminous.
You got to speak into the
Sorry
microphone.
about that. Luminous landscape painting with water mixable oils. Lori McNee.
That's a beautiful painting on the cover, but you do more than one painting in it, because I think
do.
there's another one shown on the back
Right,
cover.
I do a summer scene and a winter scene, and both, again, I paint light in that's what
I think
my
that's
goal.
one of the hardest things, is to create that sense of light.
Light
You know,
and
there's a lot of
atmosphere.
little tricks to create, to make that light feel like it really
right.
illuminates, and how to make that sparkle on the water.
And I share
yeah.
all my tricks.
Yeah, of
I
course.
I didn't hold anything back, you guys.
Yeah.
And that's my personality. I go for it, and
Yeah.
and I want to help others. It makes me very happy to see.
You're very generous. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Eric, for
and
everything.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So Today's podcast was sponsored by PleinAir Magazine's African Painting Safari, kind of a bucket list trip. It's going to be fun. Learn more at africanpaintingsafari.com. And if you're going to do it soon because you got to get a visa. And I don't think you have to have vaccinations. That's good. The other thing is, don't quote me on that, by the way. The other thing is PleinAirSalon.com, winning more than $27,000 in prizes, including a $15,000 cash prize and the cover of PleinAir Magazine. You enter that at PleinAirSalon.com. And if you've not seen my Sunday morning blog, have you seen my Sunday morning blog? You haven't. Oh, wow. It's called Sunday Coffee.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, it's up to 100,000 readers now already in a very short time. And so you can find it. There's a website for it, coffeewitheric.com. And I got a new book out, too. I don't know if you saw it. It's called Make More Money Selling Your Art. We're going to tell you how to buy that one of these days. PleinAir movement is red hot, which is why PleinAir Magazine continues to be the #1 selling art magazine nationally at Barnes & Noble. We're pretty excited about that. Pick one up or get a subscription for about half the price at PleinAirMagazine.com. This is always fun. Let's do it again sometime. There's Tim Newton, world famous head of the Salmagundi Club. And come over here and say hello before we end this podcast.
Hi, Tim.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, Tim, just quickly, tell us your impressions of the PleinAir convention.
Wow. This has been really amazing. I have my first time here. I'm sorry to say. I'm happy to be here. Thank you. And this has been truly remarkable. What you put on here is a great service to the art community. Thank you, Eric.
Well, you're very welcome, Tim. Thank you for being here. I'm honored. And
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for listening. This is the PleinAir Podcast. I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. And remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.